Welcome to the Special Finance Committee meeting of May 27th, 2024. I acknowledge the Shaanu and Sauk First Nations on whose land we live, work, and play. This acknowledgement is only one small part of supporting Indigenous communities as we continue each day to listen, learn, and act to support truth and reconciliation. Please be sure to keep your cell phones turned off during the meeting. There will be two meetings this evening, the finance meeting, the special finance meeting, it's not our regular one, followed by the council meeting. There will be public participation at each meeting specific to that particular meeting. Committee, there's an agenda before you. Are there any additions or approvals or changes?
I move approval.
Moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Mayor Little. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Public participation. Anyone in the community that would like to speak at the mic, please state your name and street in which you live. And when you speak at the mic, I ask that you be respectful in your presentation of yourself to our council, our staff, and the people in the gallery this evening. Okay, seeing none, we'll turn to page 3 where we have a staff report on the 2024 reserve balances. We have a presentation this evening from our accountant, Mr. Sam Welland. If you'd like to step forward, please.
Thank you.
Good to see you again.
Thank you. And thanks for inviting me here tonight. It's good to be back. Bob asked me to come and talk to the reserves report, which we do every year at this time after the audit's been done. And I asked him whether maybe you'd like to have a little presentation about the background to the reserves, because we've been doing this. We've had a full reserves policy for, I think it was 2013, 2014. We did the bylaw and promised to do a presentation once a year on the status of the reserve. So I've got 10 slides here. It should take 10 minutes, but if you've got any questions, just stop me. And this is, some of these slides came from a few years ago. So I'm going to talk about what reserves are, why we need them, and do we have enough. So last meeting, I think you looked at the financial statements, and I don't know how many of you can really read the financial statements, but there's some numbers there that, you know, you can think of Machosen's financial balance sheet in terms of the millions that are there. So we've got financial assets of 23 million. We owe 4 million of that to other people. We've got $36 million of capital assets. That's the depreciated value of the capital assets. And that gives $55 million. The net worth of Machosen is 55 million. So it's not called net worth, it's called accumulated surplus according to the auditors, but you can think of it in terms of most people understand their own net worth. Looking at that slightly differently, this is Machosen's net worth. The green part is the capital assets that we have, the roads, the buildings, the vehicles and so on. We own all of those outright, so they are, you know, they're more like, you know, your, in terms of your own net worth, like your house, right? And then the portion that's in red there are the assets that are held in mostly in cash, and those are the ones that represent the reserves that we have. So I looked up a couple of definitions of reserves, and there's different definitions for accountants and for regular people. And so I tried to come up with something that is understandable. So reserves are like savings accounts, accumulation of funds for future purposes. Another definition, reserves are funds that are kept aside to pay for things in the future. So you might not think of yourselves as having reserves, but most of us have a retirement fund. We put money aside for retirement. We put money aside for our kids' education. You put money aside for a rainy day. Those are the sort of, those are the reserves that people have. And municipalities need to have reserves for much the same reasons. Machosen needs reserves for various reasons, one of which is we are often given money with restrictions on it, like the Community Growth Fund that we were given, I think $2.4 million last year. So that's not just money that you can do anything with. There's some restrictions on that. So we've put it in a reserve, and that's that's a big part of the reserves that we've got. There's also the gas tax money is given to us with restrictions. There's also, it hasn't happened for a while, but developers, if we did have development, developers would give us reserves for park space. There's a formula for how much of they can give us money for parks acquisition, and we've got parks acquisition fund that we can only spend on parks. So there's those restricted reserves. Secondly, we need reserves to replace the capital assets that we've got. So there's the roads, the buildings, the vehicles, and Machosen has a policy of not borrowing money. So we need to have savings accounts so that we can replace those assets. And we've done pretty well on building up the reserves, so that last year we bought an expensive fire truck that we paid for without borrowing, and we're going to be able to. There's going to be enough money to pay for the fire hall without borrowing too, because we built up those reserves. So that's a big portion of the reserves. There's anticipated events that we kind of know that are going to happen, or we think that might happen. One of those is a reduction in the PILTs. When all the land settlements are done, we're likely to lose some of the payments in lieu of taxes we get on those funds, and we have to be careful anyway because there's government policy. Future, we built up reserves because we were anticipating paying for RCMP costs. So that was one of the reasons we built up reserves, so that we were ready for things that are going to happen in the future. And just preparing for future operations, for changes in we use snow removal as a good example of, we never know how much we're going to have to spend on snow removal. Some years it's twice as much as we budget, and some years it's half as much as we budget. So we build up the reserves in the years when we don't spend very much, and then we've got that to cover over expenditures if they happen. Another reason, this is debt. Machosen's debt is 0 compared with the debt, and this is per capita debt of the other municipalities. Langford and Victoria both have quite a bit of debt.
Good man.
It's not me, but the only thing I did is I told council a few years ago, if you want to be you don't want to borrow, you have to have reserves. You have to have a savings account. So, so that you've made that work, and it can still work into the future. So, the other reason that Majosen needs reserves is our roads. Compared with everybody else's roads, we have 18 meters of roads per capita, which is, I think, again, it's about 3 times the provincial average, and a whole lot more than probably, is it 10 times Victoria's roads. So we've got a lot of roads, and they're going to be expensive going into the future. So, do we have enough reserves? That's a question. It looks kind of like it's there's a lot of money in reserves, but actually when you look at our reserves per capita, and I've taken 2022 as the year that the provincial statistics are published every year. The 2023 statistics won't be published until the late fall this year. But going back to 2022, our reserves were $2,900 per capita, and the provincial average was actually higher than that, $3,000 per capita. And other municipalities, there's some of those smaller municipalities like Fraser Lake and Zabelis, and a lot of those smaller places have quite large reserves. I don't know why, actually. It's not all small municipalities have large reserves, but but they do. And then there's larger places like Burnaby has huge reserves into the billions, and that's at about $10,000 per capita. And the lowest in the province is Good Neighbours. But that's their policy, and that's the way they go about things. They like to obviously to use up all their reserves and before they borrow. This is how we compare with other municipalities in the region. Less than Esquimalt and Bay, but more than Colwood and Langford and Zook. And so that gives you some context which to look at this report. So happy to answer questions on the generalities if you've got them, or I can go right into the report.
Thank you. Committee, do you have any questions?
No, right now. That was super clear. Thank you.
Okay. Great. So, I'd say this report we issue every year after the auditors have been. It does the schedule, which is shown here, very tiny numbers, I'm sorry, but at least it gets them all on one page, and you can see them all there, and it agrees with the audited financial statements. And so just wonder if anybody's got any questions about the numbers, and then I can go over each of the reserves and talk about its whether there's the appropriate amount in there or whether we should do something about it.
Through you, Mr. Donaldson. Sam, could you give us some background on interest, how interest is dealt with? Just go back to the fund and how the rates are set, and
some of the reserves earn interest and some of them don't. Most of the big ones do. The ones that are set up by bylaw, we have to add interest to the reserves. But the operating reserves, we don't. The snow removal reserve, we don't bother putting that in a separate savings account and getting interest. But the general capital reserve and the big asset replacement reserves are all have their own savings accounts. And so that was, if that answers the first part of your question. The second part of the question is how much interest they earn, which is as much as we can get at any particular point in time. A couple of years ago, that was pretty low. It was 1 point something percent. And last year we had them invested in. Most of them are invested in with the Municipal Finance Authority in their bond funds, and or their short-term, medium-term, or long-term bond funds. But the banks. And we have taken some of the money when we think interest rates are going to go down, like we did this year. They haven't gone down all that much, but we invested some money, I think about $4 million with Coast Capital Savings in a 1-year GIC, which is getting slightly above the MFA bond fund.
Okay.
Varies year by year, but we're doing as well as anybody else. So.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, through the chair. Sam, I sent a note earlier today just about a couple of numbers here that I was curious to know a bit more about. One was the gas tax reserve, and we're predicting about spending $222,000 this year, and I think you might have a better idea than I do what those projects were.
Well, one of the, we take some of that money towards the roads capital program, and I think that's 200,000, and I think there's 22 or 32,000 going to trails. So that's where we're using that.
Thank you. As I was going through it today, I just couldn't find that in my notes.
Yeah.
The other one was the climate action, $30,000 projected expenditure this year.
That's the heat pump for the.
Oh, very good. Yes, I remember that now.
Yeah. And they're keen on us spending that money, by the way.
Yes.
So.
See what we can do about that.
Yeah. So.
Well, another something I noticed was it looks like the casino revenue is down. Is there some thought about that? Is that just what happened last year?
So that isn't on here, right?
On the flip side.
Oh,
sorry.
I
Maybe
see.
I'm wandering into the surplus utilization.
Yeah. So I can say yes, the casino revenue is down.
Yeah.
We don't. It's not something we actively have much say in. We just
we're not
receive
managing
the check.
It's just whatever happened.
Yeah, and actually, ever since the casino opened, the revenue has not been going up. And of course, during COVID, it was
down.
It moves down, and I think there's a lot of other places people can gamble their money these days.
Certainly, and I suppose there's a question of disposable income and all that question of what people are able to do. It's also on the back page, AROs. I wasn't sure what that was a short form for.
That's asset retirement obligations. And that's a new accounting standard where we have to recognize the liability that we have for any of our assets that will cost us money to dispose of. And what that means, where that shows up is actually usually asbestos in buildings. So the school building, and there's a couple of other smaller buildings we've got that have some asbestos in it, and when we when they reach the end of their useful life, it will cost us money to remove that, to demolish them. It costs us extra money, so we have to set that aside.
Thank you. And I remember that now also through the
Yeah.
financial statements. It came up as a new item this year, I suppose. I guess my other question was on the back, like second page again. At the very end, we end up with $173,000 in unallocated money. And I'm wondering what happens to that. I can see how
It's already happened.
it's already happened. Perfect.
You've already spent it.
Okay.
That's when you went through that process of one-times,
Yep.
that went towards funding the one-time expenditures that the list came to. And I did look it up. I think it's
We had a smaller
68,
number, but I think it climbed.
slightly different number,
Yeah.
because
Just the
when
way
we
it
came
works.
up with the number at first, the audit wasn't complete. So now we've got the exact number. It's yeah.
173. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions for Mr. Welland?
So, shall I go into the individual parts of the report now? Yeah. So, the report so we go through each of the reserves, starting with the general capital reserve, which has $1.1 million in it now, which is back to about the level the minimum level we wanted it to be. This was the reserve that funded the school building in 2017, and was reduced to 0 at that time, and we've been trying to build it up ever since. Last year you decided that the COVID restart grant money that wasn't spent would be transferred into that, so we transferred $740,000 of that unused COVID money into the capital reserve, and it's now at a level where it could be spent on an emergency, something big, something that we have to spend. But the thing to remember about this reserve is that it's one of the few reserves that isn't generating income. It's there, you can spend it once. And we spent it on the school, and then it's taken us, 7 years to build it back up in various methods. So that's about at the right level. The Parkland Acquisition Reserve is fine. That doesn't change much from one year to the next. There's no development going on. There's nobody giving us any money to put into that reserve. The gas tax money, the gas tax reserve is up and down, but it is at a reasonable level. The Growing Community Fund is a reserve which doesn't have an optimum level. It's a reserve which I'm not sure how long you've got, about 5 years to spend that money, so it's not worth putting an optimum level on it. It'll earn interest while we haven't spent it, but then expect it to be spent within 5 years. The Roads Capital Reserve is now has about over 3 million in it, because we've had a couple of years of fairly low expenditures on roads, because of waiting for an asset management plan and deciding how to go ahead with that. But I would expect that the roads are depreciating by over $1 million a year, so I expect that you know, as a reasonable number, you can expect to be expecting to be spending $1 million a year to keep up the upkeep of roads. So so it's probably at a high water level right now. It'd be interesting to see what the asset management plan says need to be spending on that. We've had recent expenditures out of the fire vehicle replacement reserve and the public works vehicle replacement reserve, so they will be on a low ebb right now, and we'll build up those funds for the next purchases. So they're kind of a reserve where, you know, we don't want it to be, you know, I don't know how much the next fire truck is going to cost. It'll probably be quite a lot. So we don't want to keep it at that level, but we want to get it up to that level pretty quickly, and then hopefully, you know, and then maybe spend it all, and so will tend to go up and down. The level of that reserve will go up and down all the time. But I don't think there's anything we really need to do about the levels of those reserves. The building replacement reserve we've been actively trying to increase that reserve since 2014, when it was actually created. We saw it as being a need. We were going to have to replace the fire hall. We wanted to have enough money to do that, and we've been putting as much money as possible into that reserve as we go along. It's now up to the level of $3 million, and we'll be putting money in again this year. So hopefully there'll be enough money to pay for the fire hall when it's built. And we're recommending, I think, we're recommending that the optimum level be increased to $4 million on that reserve, that we don't want to stop at $3 million. We'd like the fire hall to cost $3 million, but need to be realistic. The policing phase-in reserve it's interesting that we actually didn't need to take any money out of that reserve in 2023 because we took too much money out in 2022, and the RCMP have not been able to keep their staff numbers up, which is, in a way, it's a shame for policing, but in another way, we don't have to pay for officers that are not there. So our costs were down last year, down less than budgeted. So we still have $1 million in the policing phase-in reserve, which is going to be enough to do phase-in over the next 5 years. And we can talk more about that in the budget in the fall, about how much we need to increase the police tax in order by using the reserve in order to give the taxpayers the best break and the best phase-in. The Recreation Stabilization Reserve, it's an odd name, but really it's in 2000, when we started creating the reserves, we were collecting taxes for West Shore. We used to be, I think when I came here, we used to be nearly 11% of the population of the West Shore. Now we're 8 point something percent. So that means that that even though we've been collecting taxes, the amount that we've been paying to West Shore is actually less than the taxes we collect each year. But we're very aware of when something does happen at West Shore, when they need to build a new rec centre or replace assets, that we're going to have to come up with what 8 point something percent of the cost of that. So we're putting this money aside so that we don't have to borrow when the time comes. Because we have been asked before to go into debt to fund the sports stadium at West Shore, and council were not willing to do that, and eventually Langford went ahead and built the stadium on their property rather than on Wanderfuka. But that was a bullet we dodged. So we're aware that at some point we're going to have to contribute some capital funding to West Shore, and that's where this reserve comes in, and we're recommending that the optimum level of that reserve be increased to 2 million because of the current cost of people are talking about of recreation buildings. It's huge. The revenue shortfall reserve, we've added quite a bit to that this year. We had a good year for interest income. I think it was over 5% we earned last year, which was quite a surprise. So that we're putting that away into a revenue shortfall reserve, and our concerns are that with the payments in lieu of taxes from the federal lands will actually be reduced in the next few years. So we want to be able to phase in that reduction so that it's not a big shock to the taxpayers if we lose $200,000 worth of payments in lieu of taxes in a year. Public Works Efficiency Reserve is growing again, but we have used that money in the past to build the works yard and the salt shed. When we spend that money, it's often hundreds of thousands at a time. So for right now, I think that would be okay it is over the optimal level, I think. But I wouldn't recommend any action at this time. And the only other thing, I think, the admin staffing reserve, because of the way we funded the CAO position for half a year, and then didn't hire a CAO till 2024, there was a little bit of extra money there which we can use this year and then use it up. I don't see that being an ongoing reserve to just get us through 2024. So a recommendation is that this report be received, and that the building stabilization or the building replacement reserve optimum level be increased to 4 million, the recreation stabilization reserve be increased, the optimum level increased to 2 million. The revenue shortfall reserve be increased to 500,000 optimum level. And that the transfers of the 2023 surplus be allocated to reserves as is shown in the report.
Would somebody on the committee want to motion and second those recommendations? Motioned by by Mayor Little, second by Councillor Schuster. Any questions or comments? Mayor Little.
No, I just want to express my appreciation for shepherding us through the financial times in the last little while, and for the forethought to set up reserves way back in 2013. We certainly have appreciated, especially with the policing funds, that sort of non-anticipated increase to 5,067 people. So just my thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I call the question. All in favor? And it's passed. Thank you very much, Mr. Wells.
Thank you.
So that is it for this special finance meeting. I ask for a move to adjourn, please. Moved by Mayor Little, second by Councillor Schuster. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.